So picture a $5 billion corporate fortune, right? An 8,000 square foot mansion down in Georgia and, a private jet.
Just a massive, almost incomprehensible amount of wealth.
Exactly. Now take all of that, put it on one side of a scale, and then on the other side, just place a 2-word text message. Oh, and a photograph sent to a 29-year-old bartender down in the Bahamas.
Which is just such a wild, jarring contrast.
Right. So what happens when those two completely different worlds just, well, violently collide? Today, we are taking you into a story that sounds, honestly, so incredibly plotted that if you saw it on television, you'd think the writers had just totally lost their grip on reality.
Yeah, you would think it was pure fiction.
We're talking about an international incident sparked by a high-conflict divorce, a multi-generational fortune, an alleged murder-for-hire plot, and amazingly, an accidental digital discovery by foreign police that just tore a family apart.
Completely tore them apart.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're taking the immense stack of source material, all these court documents and the news reports on this case, and breaking it all down for you.
It is a staggering sequence of events, honestly. And there is just an immense amount of mechanical complexity to unpack here. But before we dive into the timeline, there is a massive public misconception we really need to clear up right now.
Yeah, we have to address this right out of the gate.
If you've been following the tabloids or, the cable news chyrons, you have likely seen this referred to as the Robert Shiver murder or the Shiver murder plot. We need to correct the record on that. Robert Shiver is completely unharmed.
Right, he's alive and well.
He is alive, he is well. In fact, he is actively participating in the ongoing trial as what they call a virtual complainant. He has testified on the record that he is immensely thankful to be alive. So the legal proceedings we are mapping out today in the Nassau Supreme Court do not concern a completed homicide.
Not at all.
They center entirely on a charge of conspiracy to commit murder.
And that distinction, it isn't just a technicality. It is the absolute foundation of the legal battle we're about to explore. Our mission for this deep dive is to map out exactly how a marital breakdown in the affluent, quiet town of Thomasville, Georgia, rapidly escalated into an international criminal trial.
Which is a huge leap.
It's a massive leap. We are going to examine the fascinating and honestly often terrifying friction that occurs when modern digital forensics collide with two fundamentally different legal arenas.
United States family law and the Bahamian criminal code.
Exactly. And to be clear for you listening, we aren't here to moralize or to debate the ethics of the justice system. We are here to look at the cold, hard mechanics of what happens when the absolute highest stakes of wealth meet the rigid, unforgiving machinery of international law. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it, because you cannot begin to comprehend the alleged text messages or the arrests or, the bail revocations without first understanding the absolute center of gravity in this case, and that is the money.
Yeah, the money is everything here.
The financial stakes here aren't just a backdrop. They are the active catalyst for almost every single decision made by both parties.
So let's unpack the sheer scale of that wealth, because the term multimillionaire doesn't really do justice to the dynamic at play. We're dealing with Robert Shiver. The quick bio is that he was an Auburn University long snapper from 2006 to 2008.
Right, a college athlete.
Yeah, and he had a very brief stint as undrafted free agent with the Atlanta Falcons back in 2009. Today, he holds a corporate title as the executive vice president of Senior Life Insurance Company. But that executive salary, whatever it may be, is just a drop in the bucket compared to his actual financial footprint.
Oh, absolutely. The true source of the power dynamic here is multi-generational corporate aristocracy. Robert is the scion of the Flowers Foods baking conglomerate.
Which is huge.
It's massive. His father, Alan Shiver, led that operation for 4 decades. We are talking about a publicly traded monolith valued at over $5 billion.
$5 billion.
Yeah,
with a B.
With a B. And that level of wealth, it creates its own ecosystem. It's not just about having disposable income, It's about access, legacy, and an infrastructure of absolute control. Currently, Robert is residing in Georgia, retaining primary custody of their 3 young sons. And, as a side note that adds to the intense public scrutiny, he is dating reality television star Savannah Chrisley.
Right, which just adds a whole other layer of media attention to this. Then you have Lindsay Shiver. She and Robert met back at Auburn as student athletes. She was a former Miss Alabama pageant contestant and an Auburn cheerleader. She graduated in 2009 with a marketing degree.
But for the entirety of their marriage, right, she was at home.
Yeah, for the entirety of the marriage, which began in March of 2010, she operated as a stay-at-home mother to those 3 boys. For over a decade, their life was the absolute pinnacle of Southern affluence. We're talking about a $2.5 million, 8,000 square foot mansion in Thomasville.
Luxury yachts.
Luxury yachts, yes. And constant access to a private plane that they used to fly back and forth to the exclusive Baker's Bay Golf and Ocean Club in the Abaco Islands of the Bahamas.
Which introduces the entirely separate Bahamian cast of characters that eventually get, well, pulled into this vortex. Down the Abaco Islands, you have Terrence Bethel. He is a 30-year-old local Bahamian who worked as a bartender at a place called Grabber's Bar and Grill on Great Guana Cay.
Right.
Bethel became Lindsay's romantic partner during the deterioration of her marriage to Robert. And then you have Farron Newbold Jr., who goes by Phalo. He's a 29-year-old Bahamian national and an associate of Bethel's. Newbold is the individual that the prosecution ultimately alleges was the intended hitman in this conspiracy.
You know, there's this cultural assumption that extreme wealth acts as a buffer against the ugly mechanics of divorce. Like, the idea is that if you have unlimited resources, you just hire the best lawyers, liquidate a few assets, split the massive pile of cash, and walk away to your respective luxury condos.
That's the Hollywood version, yeah.
Exactly. But looking at the architecture of the Shiver divorce, the wealth seems to function more like a corporate immune system. It doesn't insulate the couple from conflict. It weaponizes the conflict. Walk me through how a $5 billion familial backdrop actually makes the process of uncoupling more volatile, not less.
It's an excellent way to frame it, really. When you are dealing with standard assets, say splitting a 401k and selling a suburban home, the parameters of the fight are pretty finite. The math is relatively simple.
Right, you split the house, you split the retirement.
Exactly. But multi-generational wealth of this magnitude is deeply entrenched. It is tied up in trusts, corporate shares, family legacy, and physical infrastructure. The Thomasville mansion and the private jet are prime examples of this.
They aren't just toys, right?
No, in the socioeconomic bracket, a private jet is not a luxury item. It is a fundamental mechanism of physical freedom and lifestyle maintenance. When the marriage begins to fracture, the family's wealth apparatus instinctively activates to protect the core assets.
So it's like a defensive reflex?
Yes. The pressure isn't just about making sure you have enough to live on. It's an existential fight over maintaining access to a multi-million-dollar reality. When you inject allegations of infidelity into a financial apparatus designed to protect the bloodline's assets, the legal maneuvering instantly becomes ruthless.
Which brings us to the formal disintegration of the marriage. Because the timeline of their legal impersonal collapse in early 2023 reads like an escalating drumbeat. On April 5, 2023, Robert Shiver makes the first massive preemptive strike.
And it was a huge strike.
He officially files for divorce in Thomas County, Georgia. And he doesn't just file for a standard dissolution of marriage, irreconcilable differences. He files citing adulterous conduct, specifically citing his discovery of Lindsay's affair with Terrence Bethel.
The initial demands laid out in Robert's filing are remarkably aggressive. They were designed to essentially strip Lindsay of the life she had known for 13 years.
What exactly did he ask for?
Well, he demanded primary physical custody of their 3 sons. He demanded exclusive use and ownership of the 8,000 square foot Thomasville mansion. And perhaps most punitively, he demanded that the court grant Lindsay absolutely zero alimony.
Wait, zero? After 13 years?
Zero alimony. His legal justification for paying zero spousal support to a stay-at-home mother of 3 was that she possessed a marketing degree from 2009 and was therefore entirely capable of entering the workforce and supporting herself.
I mean, I have to push back on the sheer audacity of that legal argument. Using a 14-year-old, essentially unused undergraduate degree as a shield to deny alimony to the mother of your children. When your family's worth $5 billion, that is a scorched earth tactic.
It's extremely aggressive.
It's not just a negotiation starting point, It's a financial decapitation attempt. How does Lindsay respond to being cornered like that?
She responds with explosive counterclaims of her own, painting a picture of just a gilded nightmare. She alleges a systemic history of physical, mental, and emotional abuse. And to illustrate the level of fear and paranoia inside that home, she stated in her filings that she had been forced to install physical locks on the interior doors of her bedrooms just to feel safe from him.
Oh, wow. Just visualizing that is incredibly grim. You have this palatial, sprawling estate, but the actual living experience has been reduced to hiding behind a deadbolt in your own hallway.
Furthermore, she alleges severe financial coercion. This goes directly back to the concept of the corporate immune system we discussed earlier. Lindsay claimed that once the divorce was filed, Robert systematically cut off her access to all family funds.
Just totally froze her out.
Froze her out. She was barred from using the private plane. She even claimed that, at one point, she took the children for a weekend and entirely refused to disclose their location to her.
And what's fascinating is that this wasn't just playing out in quiet, sterile court filings. The psychological warfare was spilling out into the open, generating a massive paper trail with local law enforcement. In these high-conflict cases, 911 calls stop being about actual emergencies and start becoming strategic weapons.
That is so true.
You call the police not because you need protection, but because you need a badge number and an incident report to show the family court judge.
Exactly. The local authorities in Thomasville essentially became unwitting referees in a civil dispute. For instance, shortly after the April divorce filing, Robert's mother dials 911 on Lindsay.
His mother gets involved.
Yes, the incident takes place at the in-laws' property. On the call, Robert's mother describes Lindsay as delusional, claims she is harassing the family, and demands that officers physically remove her from the premises.
So now the extended family is actively marshaling law enforcement against her, and Lindsay reciprocates a few weeks later. On April 30th, she calls the Thomas County Sheriff's Office directly to the mansion and her emergency. She claims Robert is violating their informal parenting agreement because he is, and I quote from the report, frolicking around with the children instead of bringing them home at the agreed-upon time.
Frolicking.
Frolicking. Calling armed deputies to your home to report frolicking perfectly encapsulates the total collapse of rational communication. They are completely incapable of speaking to one another directly.
But this escalating use of the police as personal intermediaries reaches its absolute peak on July 16, 2023. This is the incident at the private jet hangar, which serves as the immediate catalyst for literally everything that follows.
This incident is almost surreal. It's July 16th. Lindsay calls 911 again. The police arrive at the local tarmac, body cameras are rolling, and they walk into a standoff. Lindsay is demanding to board the family's private aircraft.
And her destination is the kicker.
Right. Her intended destination. Great Guana Cay in the Bahamas. She wants to use her husband's family jet to go see Terrence Bethel, the very man she's having the affair with.
It is a profound demonstration of entitlement colliding with a severed financial umbilical cord. On the police body cam footage, Lindsay attempts to justify the police presence by stating that Robert had been physical in the past and she called them to preemptively ensure he didn't attack her in the hangar.
But Robert is there, right? What is he doing?
Robert, for his part, appears completely calm on the footage. He simply explains to the officers that he is the owner of the aircraft and he absolutely refuses to financially subsidize or facilitate his wife's travel to visit her affair partner.
I mean, the officers are standing there, likely realizing no crime has been committed. It's a pure civil dispute over an asset, so no arrests are made. But the sheer audacity of demanding the jet to see your lover and having the police show up to negotiate it, you really have to wonder at what point a civil dispute historically crosses the threshold into criminal territory.
Because right there in the hangar, it's just a dispute.
Right, the tension is suffocating, but it is entirely legal.
The demarcation line is intent combined with illegal methodology. You can argue over a multi-million-dollar aircraft, you can use the police to document your spouse's frolicking, and you can weaponize your family's trust fund to financially bleed your partner dry. All of that is completely legal, however destructive it might be.
Right.
The threshold is crossed. The absolute second one party decides to abandon the civil legal framework entirely and solicit a violent, permanent resolution to the negotiation. And the prosecution alleges that this exact threshold was crossed just hours after that standoff in the hangar. Astonishingly, despite the massive confrontation, both Robert and Lindsay ended up traveling to the Bahamas separately shortly after.
Which brings us to the most staggering coincidence in this entire saga. Because the discovery of the alleged murder plot didn't come from an FBI wiretap. It didn't come from Robert hiring a private investigator. It was a complete blind accident orchestrated by a completely unrelated crime in a foreign country.
The timeline here is critical. We are still on that exact same day, July 16, 2023. Down in the Abaco Islands, the Royal Bahamas Police Force is dealing with a routine, localized issue. There had been a commercial break-in, a burglary, at Grabber's Bar and Grill.
Wait, the same bar where Terrence Bethel works?
Yes, the exact same bar. The Bahamian police are investigating this break-in, looking for evidence regarding stolen cash or damaged property. As part of that standard investigation, they execute a search warrant on a suspect's cell phone. They're performing a localized forensic data extraction, essentially dumping the contents of the phone to look for texts about stolen liquor or pawned goods.
I want to pause on the mechanics of this digital extraction for a second, because you hear about encrypted apps like WhatsApp and assume they are bulletproof, right? Like end-to-end encryption means that if law enforcement intercepts the data while it's traveling through the air from a cell tower to a satellite, it just looks like randomized, unreadable code.
Exactly, it's scrambled.
But that encryption only protects the data in transit. If the police have physical possession of your unlocked device, the app has already decrypted the messages for you to read them. The keys are on the device itself. So when the Bahamian police plug that phone into their forensic extraction software, they aren't breaking encryption, are they? They're just reading the locally stored data.
That is exactly how the forensic architecture works. The police bypass the transit encryption by accessing the localized endpoint, the phone itself. And what they find during this extraction has absolutely nothing to do with the bar burglary.
Nothing at all.
Nothing. They stumble into an encrypted WhatsApp group chat involving 3 individuals, Lindsay Shiver, Terrence Bethel, and Farron Newbold Jr. As the detectives scroll through this chat, they find a message transmitted directly from Lindsay to Newbold on the night of July 16th.
Just hours after the jet standoff in Georgia.
Correct. The message contains 2 distinct elements. First, a photograph of Robert Shiver. Second, a 2-word text directive. Kill him.
Kill him. 2 words sent into the digital ether, accompanied by a target photo. It is the ultimate digital smoking gun. Lindsay is subsequently taken into Bahamian police custody, and during her interrogation, she formally admits to sending that specific message and the photograph.
Which is a huge admission.
It is. Now, it is imperative to note that her defense team adamantly argues this confession was the result of severe coercion. They claim she was subjected to immense psychological duress, held in a foreign, unfamiliar jail, and pressured into a confession.
Right. They are fighting the validity of that interrogation hard.
But regardless of the confession's admissibility, the digital footprint, the actual existence of the WhatsApp message originating from her device, is an irrefutable forensic fact.
And that undeniable digital fact activates a very specific, very rigid piece of foreign legislation. To understand why Lindsay Shiver is currently facing the prospect of 60 years in a Bahamian prison, we have to look closely at Section 89, subsection 1 of the Bahamian Penal Code, Chapter 84.
Okay, let's get into the code.
In Bahamian jurisprudence, the crime of conspiracy is complete. The absolute moment an agreement is reached between 2 or more parties to commit a criminal offense.
I want to challenge this because to an American listener, this sounds almost like prosecuting a thought crime. If I jokingly text a friend, hey, I'm going to rob a bank, the FBI doesn't kick my door down unless I actually go buy ski masks and draw a map of the vault. Don't you need to prove some kind of forward momentum?
You are referencing the concept of an overt act, which is a staple in many, though definitely not all, United States jurisdictions. In the U.S., prosecutors often have to show that the conspirators took a tangible, physical step toward executing the crime.
Like wiring a down payment.
Right, wiring money, renting a getaway car, purchasing a firearm. The Bahamian Penal Code entirely dispenses with that requirement. The law does not care if no money changed hands. It does not care if Newbold never bought a plane ticket to Georgia, or if he never acquired a weapon, or if he never even looked up Robert Shiver's address. The prosecution merely has to prove that a meeting of the minds occurred, that the text "kill him" constituted a genuine agreement to end a human life.
That is a terrifyingly low mechanical threshold for a charge that carries 6 decades behind bars. You don't have to look for a money trail. You just have to prove the digital syntax was a literal contract, which sets up an incredible burden for the defense, because how on earth do you defend against a literal text message? It's sitting right there in black and white on the prosecutor's projector screen.
It requires the defense to fundamentally dismantle the concept of criminal intent. This brings us to the dueling narratives currently being litigated in the Nassau Supreme Court as we sit here in 2026. The prosecution's narrative is highly literal and transaction-based.
They are looking at the words.
Exactly. They point to the overwhelming financial and custodial pressure Lindsay was under. She was facing the loss of her children, her 8,000-square-foot home, and her multi-million-dollar lifestyle due to a divorce filing that demanded she receive 0 alimony. The prosecution argues that, backed into this existential corner, she made a calculated decision to eliminate the source of the threat. In their view, kill him means exactly what it says.
It's the Occam's razor argument. The simplest explanation is that a target photo, and the words kill him mean you want the person dead.
Mm.
But the defense has constructed an entirely different reality around those two words. And looking at the evidence impartially, their argument taps into a very relatable, modern psychological phenomena. They're arguing that this wasn't a contract. It was pure, unfiltered emotional venting.
Yes. The public framework for this defense was actually laid out by Terence Bethel himself during an interview in October of 2024. He stated unequivocally, nobody ever wanted him dead. To understand the defense's strategy, you have to reconstruct the precise emotional ecosystem of July 16th.
Okay, set the scene.
According to their narrative, Lindsay was completely destabilized. She had just survived the agonizing standoff at the private jet hangar. She is separated from her 3 young children. And then, allegedly, on that same evening, she receives a photograph of Robert back in Georgia.
And according to the defense, what was depicted in that photograph?
He was allegedly socializing with another woman. But crucially, the defense claims that at the time Robert was with this other woman, their 3 young sons had been left entirely unsupervised.
Okay, let's play this out psychologically. You are listening to this, you're thousands of miles away. You are already in the middle of a brutal, high-stakes custody war. You are locked out of your family's wealth, and you suddenly receive visual confirmation that your husband is out with someone else while your children are left alone. The defense is essentially arguing that this induced a state of temporary, blinding rage.
Exactly. Their core argument is that the text to Newbold was not a logistical directive to an assassin. It was a hyperbolic scream into the digital void. It was the frantic, desperate expression of a mother experiencing extreme emotional distress.
They are leaning on the context.
Heavily. They rely on the complete absence of any logistical follow-through. They point out that no banking transfers occurred, no encrypted blueprints were sent, no timelines were established. It was an isolated eruption of rage that began and ended with hitting send on WhatsApp.
I think anyone analyzing their own digital history can relate to the inherent danger of texting. We have all, at some point, fired off a message in the heat of an emotional spike that we didn't literally mean. I'm going to kill my boss. I'm going to strangle my roommate.
Oh, definitely. People exaggerate all the time.
Right. In a verbal conversation, your tone of voice, your body language, the exasperated sigh, all of that provides the context that you are venting, not plotting a felony. But text is completely sterile. It strips away all of your humanity and leaves only the raw, literal data.
Which is terrible for a defendant.
It is. The prosecution gets to take that transient 30-second emotion, freeze it in digital amber, and project it on a screen 3 years later to 12 strangers in a jury box. Proving that you didn't mean what you literally typed seems like trying to prove a negative.
It is an incredibly steep hill to climb, especially when operating as a foreign national in a different legal system. And while this profound debate over digital intent and Bahamian conspiracy law was taking shape for trial, an entirely separate, almost chaotic drama was unfolding regarding Lindsay's physical location and her basic freedom.
The bail situation.
Yes, the bail proceedings in this case functioned like a transnational ping-pong match.
The timeline of her custody is genuinely dizzying. Let's trace it, because it involves GPS tracking, international borders, and a concept of justice that is going to sound completely alien to anyone familiar with the American system.
In July 2023, following the extraction of the WhatsApp messages, Lindsay, Bethel, and Newbold are all arrested and remanded to the Bahamas Department of Corrections. They are sitting in a foreign prison. But then, in August 2023, we see a truly bizarre twist.
Yeah, this part is wild.
Robert Shiver, the intended target of the alleged conspiracy, actually facilitates Lindsay's release. He formally withdraws his legal objection to her receiving bail.
Wait, he drops the objection.
He does. Consequently, Lindsay is granted a $100,000 bond, while her co-defendants receive $20,000 bonds. However, she is initially barred from leaving the Bahamian Islands and is fitted with an electronic monitoring device, an ankle monitor.
The psychology of Robert's decision there is just fascinating. You have just been shown evidence that your wife allegedly tried to hire a hitman to end your life, and your response is to clear the path for her to bond out of a Bahamian prison. Although his stance clearly shifts later, because months later, he is testifying that he is terrified of her.
That shift occurs on the record in December 2023. Robert appears via Zoom before Bahamian Justice Cheryl Grant Thompson. During that hearing, he explicitly testifies that he fears for his life, stating his belief that the assassination plot was, quote, close to happening.
So he does a complete 180.
Yes. Yet despite this direct testimony from the victim, Justice Grant Thompson grants a massive variation to Lindsay's bail conditions. She is permitted to leave the Bahamas and return to the United States.
But she isn't just allowed to go back to her old life. She is essentially placed under international house arrest.
Correct. The terms are highly restrictive. She is ordered to reside exclusively at her parents' home in Abbeville, Alabama. She must continue wearing the electronic monitoring device 24/7. She is subjected to a strict 8:00 p.m. curfew.
And she can't go to Georgia, right?
Right, and most importantly, she is entirely banned from entering the state of Georgia where Robert and the children reside, with the sole exception of attending mandatory court-ordered divorce or custody hearings.
So she is geographically quarantined in Alabama, facing 60 years in a foreign prison. You would assume the strategy here is absolute silence. Keep your head down, obey the curfew, and let your lawyers work. But she does the exact opposite.
She engages in a pattern of behavior that completely alienates the Bahamian judicial system. In October 2024, the Bahamian Director of Public Prosecutions moves forcefully to revoke her bail. They present a mountain of tracking data provided by Metro Security Solutions, the private company monitoring her ankle bracelet.
What did the tracking data show?
The GPS data demonstrates that Lindsay had repeatedly breached her geographic restrictions. She had left her approved Alabama residence and was pinged traveling in Florida multiple times throughout June and July of 2024.
And it wasn't just the travel. She actually filed a legal motion requesting that the court remove her ankle monitor and her listed justification. She claimed the device was embarrassing and stated that it was hindering her ability to pursue a career as a social media influencer.
Yeah, that was in the motion.
I have to stop and marvel at the cognitive dissonance there. You are the prime suspect in an international murder-for-hire conspiracy. The evidence against you is your own text message. You are facing the rest of your natural life in Fox Hill Prison, and your primary grievance is that a GPS tracker clashes with your influencer aesthetic. It shows a staggering disconnect from the gravity of the legal machinery closing in around her.
That disconnect becomes even more apparent when both she and Terrence Bethel decide to bypass the court and take their case directly to the American public. They both sat down for highly publicized national television interviews.
Oh, the morning shows.
Yes, they appeared on Good Morning America and Inside Edition, broadcasting their defense to millions of viewers.
To an American audience, doing a PR tour before a trial feels almost standard. Every high-profile defendant does an exclusive sit-down. Why did this infuriate the Bahamian judge so much?
Because the Bahamian legal system has an incredibly low tolerance for anything that could taint a jury pool. The rules regarding pretrial publicity are far more draconian than the media free-for-all permitted in the United States. Justice Grant Thompson had explicitly warned the defendants against attempting to try the case in the court of public opinion.
So they basically defied a direct warning.
Exactly. Going on American morning shows to plead your innocence is viewed not just as a breach of etiquette, but as a direct, contemptuous challenge to the authority of the Bahamian Supreme Court.
But the final nail in the coffin for her bail didn't come from a TV interview or a trip to Florida. It came from a terrifying incident of domestic violence back in Alabama.
In July 2024, in Dothan, Alabama, police respond to an altercation involving Lindsay and her new boyfriend, a man named Dorsey Ryan Love. According to the official police reports, Love allegedly assaulted Lindsay during an argument. The report details that he threw her onto a bed, choked her, and actively attempted to suffocate her using a pillow.
It is a horrific incident. But structurally, how does Lindsay, being the victim of a violent assault in Alabama, result in her bail being revoked in the Bahamas? She was the one attacked.
This introduces a legal philosophy known as judicial paternalism, which is a profound departure from how bail is typically handled. In October 2024, the Bahamian Supreme Court officially revokes her bail and remands her back to prison in Nassau.
And what was their reasoning?
In her ruling, the judge explicitly cites the assault in Alabama as justification. The court's logic was essentially this: your lifestyle in the United States has become so volatile, so demonstrably dangerous to your own physical well-being, that the court can no longer guarantee you will survive long enough to stand trial.
Wait, really?
Yes. Therefore, the court must incarcerate you in a Bahamian maximum security facility in order to protect you from your own life.
That is a staggering paradox. The state strips you of your freedom and locks you in a cell, ostensibly for your own physical protection, so that they can later try to lock you in a cell for the rest of your life. It is the ultimate assertion of state control over a defendant's physical body.
It is highly controversial, but the Bahamian Court of Appeal actually upheld that exact reasoning, cementing the precedent that perceived threats to a defendant's own safety are a legally valid foundation for pretrial detention. Lindsay was eventually granted bail once again in February 2025, but the new conditions included a completely ironclad gag order, no more television interviews, no more unauthorized state line crossings.
So we have this sprawling, chaotic, international criminal saga. But we cannot forget that the entire architecture of this crisis rests on the foundation of the Thomasville divorce. And while Lindsay is being shipped back and forth across the ocean, her legal team is fighting a brutal shadow war back in the U.S. family courts.
The overlap there is intense.
Yeah, the way these two legal systems, the civil court in Georgia and the criminal court in Nassau, interact is absolutely fascinating because they're essentially feeding off of each other.
The parallel universe of the family law proceedings provides a masterclass in jurisdictional friction. Let's examine the fierce legal battle over the sealing of the civil records. In October 2025, Robert Shiver's legal team files a formal motion in Thomas County, Georgia, requesting that the judge seal the entire divorce docket from public view.
And his reasoning makes sense on a human level.
It does. Robert's stated reasoning is highly sympathetic and logical. He argues that sealing the records is necessary to protect their 3 minor children from the relentless, toxic tabloid attention generated by their mother's murder-for-hire trial. He wants to prevent his kids from being able to Google their parents' divorce decrees and reading explosive allegations of abuse and infidelity.
Any parent listening to this would understand that instinct. But Lindsay's civil lawyer in Georgia, Alva O. Smith, aggressively fights to keep the records completely open to the public. And he's not doing it because he wants the tabloids to have access. He's doing it because the Bahamian criminal defense team desperately needs those U.S. documents.
Precisely. Lindsay's criminal defense in Nassau is entirely predicated on proving that she was under immense, destabilizing emotional and financial duress on the night she sent that text message. To prove that duress to a Bahamian jury, her criminal lawyers need the official U.S. family court documents.
Like the bank records.
Yes, the financial deposition showing her funds were cut off, the initial divorce filing demanding 0 alimony, the contested parenting plans. If the judge in Georgia seals those records, the Bahamian lawyers lose their ability to legally access and introduce that foundational evidence in the criminal trial.
It creates a brilliant, agonizing legal catch-22. A victory in one courtroom guarantees a catastrophic vulnerability in the other. If she agrees to seal the records to protect her custody chances in Georgia, she sabotages her defense against a 60-year prison sentence in the Bahamas. How did her lawyers navigate that trap?
They navigated it by turning the media spectacle against Robert. Lindsay's legal team compiled a comprehensive dossier of tabloid articles and presented it to the Georgia judge. They used this dossier to demonstrate that Robert's own family and associates were actively leaking information and participating in public relations campaigns.
So pointing the finger back at him.
Yes, they successfully argued that Robert's sudden concern for the children's privacy was disingenuous, that it was a tactical maneuver designed solely to starve Lindsay's criminal defensive evidence rather than a genuine attempt to shield the kids.
And their gamble paid off.
It did. In April 2026, Judge Gregory Voiles ruled against Robert and denied the motion to seal. The Georgia civil records remain public, ensuring the Bahamian defense team has the ammunition they need.
But keeping the records open doesn't solve her ultimate problem: the actual custody of her 3 children. Because this entire conflict began as a fight over who gets the kids and the house. Yeah. How does a pending international felony indictment impact a standard American custody battle?
It essentially detonates it. Under Alabama Code, Section 30-3-152, and similar statutes in Georgia, the absolute overriding standard for any custody decision is the best interest of the child. In modern family law, courts generally favor joint custody arrangements.
Right, 50-50 splits.
Usually, yes. However, joint custody requires a baseline level of functional cooperation between the parents. The introduction of an active indictment for conspiracy to commit murder against the other parent mathematically incinerates any possibility of mandated cooperation. A family court judge cannot legally force a man to co-parent with a woman accused of trying to have him assassinated.
Not to mention the sheer insurmountable physics of her situation. You cannot parent a child in Georgia when you are under house arrest in Alabama or locked in a cell in Nassau.
The toll of involuntary absence is a massive, often unspoken factor in these cross-border cases. Lindsay's legal and physical entrapment in the Bahamian system for 3 years has physically separated her from her children during their crucial developmental years.
Which has to hurt her case.
Immeasurably. In family court, a prolonged physical absence is a heavily weighted negative factor. The court looks at the current reality of the child's life, and the current reality is that Robert has been the sole, stable, custodial parent for years.
Which brings us to the most terrifying mechanical reality of this entire dual system nightmare. And that's the differing burdens of proof, because the rules of gravity in a civil courtroom are completely different from the rules in a criminal courtroom.
This is the ultimate trapdoor for Lindsay Shiver. In the Nassau Supreme Court, the Bahamian prosecutors must prove her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the highest threshold in the legal system. If her defense team can inject just enough doubt about her intent, if they can convince the jury that it was merely emotional venting, she will be acquitted. She will walk out of the court a free woman.
But a victory in Nassau doesn't magically reset the board in Georgia.
Not at all, because the family courts in Georgia and Alabama operate on a much lower threshold. They use the preponderance of the evidence. The family court judge only needs to be convinced that it is more likely than not that an event occurred or that a specific environment is detrimental to the children.
So mechanically speaking, she could pull off a miracle. She could beat the conspiracy charge in the Bahamas. The jury could say, hey, we don't believe beyond a reasonable doubt that she actually hired a hitman. But the family court judge in Georgia can look at the exact same evidence, the WhatsApp messages, the kill him text, the photo, the erratic behavior, the bail violations, and say, you might have avoided a felony conviction, but the preponderance of the evidence shows you are entirely unfit for primary custody. She could win her freedom and still permanently lose her children based on the exact same two-word text message.
Exactly. A criminal acquittal does not equal a family court victory. It is entirely possible for her to be legally innocent in one jurisdiction and deemed a negligent threat in another based on the exact same data points.
It is a dizzying, inescapable web. We started this deep dive looking at a $5 billion fortune and assumed we were going to trace a story of corporate lawyers and financial buyouts. Instead, we have mapped out a terrifying jurisdictional collision. We have watched how extreme wealth, an unraveling marriage, and a single impulsive digital action triggered the overlapping contradictory machinations of U.S. family law, Bahamian penal codes, and cross-border GPS surveillance.
As the trial proceeds this summer in 2026, we are witnessing a scenario where billions of dollars in corporate equity are entirely neutralized by the metadata of a WhatsApp photo. It is a profound demonstration that while multi-generational wealth can build an impenetrable fortress around your assets, it offers absolutely zero protection against the consequences of your own digital footprint in a foreign jurisdiction.
And that brings me to a final thought I want you to mull over as we wrap up. We spent this entire time analyzing how digital messages and legal codes interact. But look at the geographic reality of what happened to Lindsay Shiver. It reveals a terrifying truth about the fragility of our legal identities. If Lindsay had sent that exact same text message while sitting in her mansion in Georgia, the American legal requirement for an overt act likely would have protected her. It would have been an ugly divorce artifact, nothing more. But because she physically crossed an invisible line on a map into Bahamian jurisdiction, those exact same two words became a felony, carrying a 60-year sentence. We like to believe that our fundamental rights and the definition of a crime are universal constants. But the Shiver case proves that your freedom, your intent, and your very reality are entirely dependent on the specific coordinates of the soil you happen to be standing on when you hit send. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we will catch you next time.